Quick audio test. Count to three real quick.
3, 2, 1. I counted to 1.
Everybody does that. Every single person does that. And then I'm going to test you this one. What did you have for breakfast?
Today I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast.
See, everybody always says I skip breakfast. I have coffee. Dang,
I had tea.
Oh, Travis!
I had Katie's
way to
tea.
go. There you go.
All right, in this episode of the Customer Engagement Lab, I'm joined by PandaDoc's CMO, Nate Gilmore. We talk about his recent transition from CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, into the Chief Marketing Officer. We also dive into storytelling. We take a look at a Dave Gerhardt and Chris Walker podcast clip talking about marketing guardrails. There's plenty of good stuff in here. We're in our brand new studios in St. Pete, Florida at Coastal Creative. And we're just excited for this episode. So stick around and listen to the whole thing. For the full viewing experience, check out our YouTube channel or check it out on PandaDoc's website. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Customer Engagement Lab. Today, we're in our new studios over at Coastal Creative in St. Pete, Florida. And I'm joined by Nate Gilmore, the CMO of PandaDoc. When he's not busy losing sleep over pipeline and revenue numbers, you can find him taking his golden doodle to puppy training classes and or teaching his 5-year-old daughter how to negotiate with buyers at garage sales for Paw Patrol money and or Frozen memorabilia. What's up, Nate? Welcome to the show, man.
Travis, thank you for having me.
So Nate, in preparing for this interview, I sourced from a couple of my LinkedIn buddies some questions who found out I was interviewing the Nate Gilmore, who recently went from CRO to CMO of PandaDoc. And it looks like the number one question was, how many additional stock options did you get? Quickly followed by, can I have some of those too? What do you have to say to that?
Of course. Yeah.
He pleads the fifth. He'd rather not answer. No, I'm just teasing. But seriously, in this episode, we really want to focus on this transition, talking about like what the difference has been for you. You've really been focused in the sales organization for the last couple of years, and transitioning over to the marketing team and really having that be the center of your focus involves a lot of new challenges and new obstacles, but also some really exciting things. So what does this mean for you first, and what went into this role change from CRO to CMO?
Sure. So first of all, CRO at PandaDoc had marketing, sales, CS, and support. So if anything, it was going from a very broad focus to now just hyper focusing on marketing. So I've always been candidly the final marketing leader other than the CEO and the VP of marketing there. So
Yeah. So essentially not a whole lot has changed in terms of
Well, it went from I had this really, really wide focus, right? And so when I came to PandaDoc, I guess we're here to tell your story, right? So when I came to PandaDoc, there was, it was around 7 million in ARR, right? So they just raised Series B, and there was no senior leadership in CS, sales, or marketing at the time. So one of the first things I did was start putting senior leadership in with the rest of the organization. And so we put in VP of marketing, and then we found Amanda for CS, amazing. And then we've gone through a couple of sales changes, and then Chad's now here for VP of sales. Hopefully he should be on your show at some point as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so with the change in kind of marketing leadership, and then and the importance of marketing to a predominantly inbound driven revenue engine that's highly focused on PLG and SMB, right? We are a marketing driven and PLG driven company. Wanted to just bring an incredible amount of focus and stability to the marketing organization. So hopefully that's a little longer winded answer on that for you.
Can you give us an inside look at what the next 12 to 18 months is going to look like for the marketing organization, and what your focus now as a CMO who's really honed in on the marketing side of things, what that's going to look like, you think?
Absolutely. So PandaDoc is a fast growth SaaS startup, right? So we're hyper scaling, right? So similar to all the other roles, like we are going to double in size, right? And so as marketing doubles, we are going to have to get, we're going to have to be very, very good at layering the additional layers of growth, seeing where the weak spots are, fixing those, and getting stronger and stronger as we get ready to become an IPO ready marketing organization, right? So we also, I think that also means that we get hyper focused, right? And so some of the things that we've done even in the first couple of months of this year is narrow down, get absolute clarity on who we're targeting. What are our top goals as the marketing organization? How does this support the company objectives? All right, so this narrowing of focus and kind of making sure that all of the departments understand, and how do we work cross-functionally to really accomplish those?
I think as somebody who's worked here for 3 years, I can already see the difference in the sense that I think PandaDoc does a really good job, whether it's the marketing all hands or the company all hands meetings we do. We always start off with the company mission, vision, and
usually North Star.
North Star.
Yeah.
And that repetition, I think, is something that...
And culture.
And culture.
Yeah, which is incredibly important right now.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think that repetition, just as like an individual contributor, an employee that's been here, that has helped me shape how I understand my role here, but also how I talk about PandaDoc, whether it's with podcast guests, whether it's with folks on LinkedIn, or whether it's just people in the general public. So we'll get into that storytelling part a little bit later in the episode, but I definitely wanted to say that repetition sometimes can feel maybe in the beginning like contrived or like forced or whatever, but it's really helpful. And I think other companies could probably take a note from that of like, hey, are you repeating what your vision, mission, culture, and North Star is at the beginning of every meeting? Because that helps align everybody so much more and bring clarity to like, we're all focused on this, and people don't have to think twice about it.
Two aspects of that. The first is that one of my old bosses, Ken, used to say, as soon as I get tired of talking about it, that's usually when people start hearing it. Right? So, because for the person who's like, they're speaking it a bunch, they've had to say it a lot of times. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is in a fast growth scaling startup, the people, like we're adding so many new people. It may be the first time a lot of people have actually heard it.
Yeah.
And so like, what is this? And then for a lot of people, it's maybe the third or fourth time. And they're like, oh, I've heard this a number of times, but maybe it finally sinks in. They're not thinking about their kid who was sick that day, the first time they heard it. And so like repetition does, I think, breed it. And I guess the third thing to add a third is as you do something and you say something over and over again, you get different flavors for it. So like you're going to taste it, you're going to feel it. It's going to have a felt sense to you much differently as you're hearing it the 5th, 6th, 20th, 100th time.
Yeah.
Because you're a different person every time you hear it. We are not the same person every day. And so you get to be a different person, and your evolution, you start to evolve with it.
I think that a lot of businesses genuinely like to hear kind of the inside look of PandaDoc. I think they also are always like curious about like where we've experimented, where we've succeeded, and where we've maybe failed or maybe not done what we wanted to do. So do you mind telling us what's been one of our biggest successes and one of our biggest failures as a sales and marketing organization over the last year?
So many. Where do I pick? So I'll just speak to my failures and I'll actually, sometimes I don't speak to my successes that well, because oftentimes if it's success, like it's always somebody else that actually did it. So some of my leadership failures that I actually kind of highlighted as part of our like learnings from last year in our marketing kickoff, our sales kickoff, and our revenue kickoffs that we did last month. First of all, complexity. If we have too many go-to-market motions, it just gets incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And Operationally, it becomes more complex. So our CFO Richard likes to say, complexity breeds complexity, right? And so if we had too many go-to-market motions last year when we started adding outbound and trying to do it, I was like, oh, it's probably a new go-to-market motion. And it ultimately wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? It's a different fly cast for the sales org. It's a different fly cast, but it's part of our upmarket motion. Right? So complexity, that's a big one. I would say, I think in many cases we tried to kind of force ourselves upmarket slightly.
Yeah.
And so one of my learnings in leadership is the ripples get bigger as it goes further out into the organization. So you toss the pebble in the lake and it looks really small right in front of you, but down the line, you don't see that the turtle, was like, oh, I felt that, on the other side of the shore. And so for me, the ripple was, hey, we're going to move up market slightly. And it turned into like, oh, we're going to shift. And it became this kind of brand shift and all this stuff. And I was like, oh boy, what did we set off here? I'm like, really? So it's complexity breeds complexity again. Yeah. It goes back to that, I think.
I think there's also this notion too in the business to business SaaS world too. This, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of people want to repeat the success of the companies like Salesforce and HubSpot and be the Aaron Rosses of the world where they're like, well, we can't IPO if we're not serving enterprise clients. We need to be swinging and getting the big tunas of the world if we want to take this company to the next level. And then I think that because that notion is for something that a lot of companies feel like when we say like, oh, we're going up market, we want to be enterprise and stuff like that. You're right. I know that I myself felt the ripple effects of like, well, how do we start to create some podcast content towards that? Or how should we?
Everybody wants to respond to it.
Yeah. We just want to be a part of it and help. And I think when we took a really hard look at PandaDoc, we're like 80% of our business is
less than 200.
Is small to medium sized businesses that are 200 less employees. And we're like, we're really good at that. Like that's what people are coming to us for. Chasing the shiny object was distracting and challenging for us. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, I think it's also like even in the conversations you just had, like going up market for us was never going enterprise.
Yeah.
Right. Like we are not we are not Oracle. We're not an enterprise software company. We've always been SMB. And the idea for us was like, hey, we're just going to go slightly up market. But even that slightly up market became we're going enterprise. Like, yeah. Whoa, what are you talking about? Well, yeah. Actually, no. Like, so it's like these changes, if anything, like our customers pull us up market because they get bigger.
Correct.
And I have almost like a first principle of SMB software, which is it's very hard for an enterprise company to go SMB. It's much easier for an SMB company to start moving up market organically. Yeah. And so I think we have always been pulled up market by our customers.
Yeah.
Right. And because, somebody uses us in a company, they go to a larger company or the company grows and they're like, hey, we want to keep on using you. And we're like, great, let's be responsive to that.
Yep.
So as opposed to driving up market, it's responding to up market, I would say is like, that was like a big learning. So complexity, that one. And then I think the last one, it kind of goes with this complexity is this idea of like, what is outbound?
Yeah.
Right. And is outbound like a raw, cold, account-based outbound, like this outbound sales motion, we're going to go do outbound? Or is it really, hey, we have a customer that looks like this, let's go find a couple more of them. Is it because we get so much inbound, and a lot of time inbound is, low intent. And by low intent, that's like the person is early in their buying cycle.
Yeah. Right.
The outbound team can be responding to that as opposed to, just somebody who's, just more inbound. And so I think what we've settled on for this year is to kind of sum up all of this stuff is we've got a lead-based high intent lead-based inbound function that's most of our SMB. And then we've got an account-based motion. That's it. And the account-based motion we're going to get much better at.
Yeah.
And an account-based motion is for us, we're going to have to learn to multi-thread. We're going to have to learn to take some intent that comes in and go find the right person in that. We'll have to find the right buyer persona in that. And so I think it's being responsive to the customer coming in. And do they have a problem that they're ready to solve right now? Or do they have a problem they're investigating and they're discovering what it is, and we can help them discover that more?
Yeah. What do you think PandaDoc is doing really well from a marketing perspective?
Really well from a marketing perspective, I think we've always been very strong at SMB inbound, right? We have an incredible lead magnet trial motion. 2 years ago, we launched FreeSign. We've had a freemium motion for a long time.
Yeah.
PandaDoc gets an incredible amount of inbound intent, template motions.
Yep.
All of that. I think we've done an incredible job of that. I think we've also gotten a lot better at customer marketing.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're starting to get a lot better at storytelling.
I know. That's what I was like, hey, we've been doing a good job with this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was fishing for a compliment, Nate.
I'm giving it to you. I'm not going to give it to you first. I think we're doing a lot better at that. I think we're getting better at merging what the product can do with what the customer's trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think and that's going to be probably one of the things we talk about more, because you're probably asking me what we need to do better next.
That is going to be my next question. What do you think is most critical for PandaDoc's marketing team to improve in the short term? And then the follow-up question is, what about the long term, right?
Yeah.
There's short-term marketing plays, and then there's long-term marketing plays.
So as a PLG company, as a product-led growth company, we want to get the product in front of the customer in the way that the customer wants to see the product, right? So we're going to get much better at talking to teams. We're going to get much better at helping teams understand, well, how do I solve my particular problem in this? Especially since PandaDoc is in many ways a horizontal use product. It's kind of like, well, do we help the salesperson with their proposals, their quotes, their configuration of pricing, and then quoting out, and their template generation? Or do we help people like education, things like that, upload and sign documents, or do student forms, or do we help HR companies? Do we help HR company, the HR departments inside of companies?
With all that paperwork they've got to...
Like new hire paperwork, job change paperwork, NDAs, all that kind of stuff. Well, hey, we can do all of that.
Yeah.
Right? And so it becomes a more of like, we have to help people that come to us with their job that they want to get done, be able to know that they can do that job and get that job done fast. And then when they have the next job, like, we can be of service to them. And so I think that's a lot of like getting people in, getting them into the product, letting the product and the customer find that great value fast, and then helping them get to the next value point as well.
I would just like to point out, I created a YouTube ad 2 years ago. You may remember it, where I dressed up as different professionals. And I said PandaDoc helps you do your job better, whether you're an HR professional, a teacher, a salesperson, or a marketer.
I love that.
Yeah, it was
we
pretty
should
fun.
Publish it again.
Yeah, we put some money behind it. It drove some traffic.
Good, let's do some more.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, I recently watched an episode of Chris Walker's podcast. This one was from about a year ago, where he had Dave Gerhardt on, and they were talking. The episode is titled, "Life is Too Short to Work for a CEO Who Doesn't Get Marketing." And Dave brought up a really cool topic that I want to chat about with you. And then, Sean, if you don't mind playing for us the clip, Dave here is going to talk about marketing guardrails.
I think you can't, everybody has this. You can't just make a marketing plan in a vacuum. You need guardrails. Like guardrails are the most important thing to making decisions as a marketing team. And so like, here's an example. I've had great relationships in my last two companies at Privy right now and Drift before this with the CEO directly. And one thing we've had very strong alignment on is guardrails. And what that means is, what are some of the principles that you have as a company on how you want to do marketing? And so, for example, at Drift, it was like, hey, we're building this category of conversational marketing. So therefore, we can't do gated content. We can't do this. We can't do that. And that made my life so much easier, because at least then we've taken some decisions off of the table for like how we're going to operate, right? Another example is right now at Privy, our focus is on small e-commerce brands. And we want to lead with our education. We want to be friendly and keep it simple and lead with coaching. So like, because we have those guidelines as an organization, we can then make decisions on the types of marketing that we can do, right? That's one part of guardrails. Another part is like the horizon of the company. When I would join Drift as the first marketing person, they had raised 15 million.
Do you want to talk about guardrails and then talk about horizon?
Yeah, let's pause that one real quick.
Because there's kind of two distinct thoughts there.
There are. So like, first of all, what's your reaction to that? What resonates with you most from what Dave was talking about?
I love the term guardrails. I would also like go back to what we first started with, like, what's the mission vision? And does the marketing team also have a mission vision? Does it ladder up into the company's mission vision? Does that work does that ladder up into what the CEO and the founders want to accomplish, especially the founder-led company?
Yeah.
Right. And so some of PandaDoc's guardrail is like, we're an SMB company. We're not an enterprise company, whatever that definition is. So enterprise tends to be defined as like, depending on the company, is it like 1,000 employee or greater kind of company, or is it less than that? Like, so then of your definition of SMB, but we're a horizontal document app that works amazing for different teams, predominantly SMB teams, right? And SMBs can be quite large.
Yeah, they can.
Right? So there's like that guardrail there. We're also a product led, which means that we want to get people into the product because the product does a great job. Like we don't want to hide the product. We don't want people to be like, oh, show me the product. Got to talk to sales to show me the product.
Yeah, that's
right?
so frustrating to see, and that's so common in B2B. They don't want to, for whatever reason, a lot of companies don't show their product, and you're like, dude, I just want to see it, like, because seeing is believing, and I think we've really started to do a much better job of that. And I remember when I was interviewing Sean a couple of months ago, we were talking about how getting somebody to use PandaDoc, the biggest hurdle was like, did they send a document? Because once they've sent a document using PandaDoc,
They get it.
they get it.
They
Like
get
everything
pieces
else
of it. They start getting pieces.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that was the hurdle, bro. I figured it out. Now I can use this tool for me and my company.
So that guardrail led to things like, well, the freemium offering.
Yeah.
Let's get as many people in as possible, right? And so we also, some of the guardrails is like, we see a lot of the value, like we don't see the value in a specific feature. We see the value in how the features work together. We've talked about it as like document as an app. We've talked about it as workflow. We've talked about it as, taking the work out of workflow, all this kind of stuff. But PandaDoc is a multi-use document tool. So for example, there's CPQ built in. There's a lot of customer lifecycle management pieces or contract management pieces of it into it.
Yeah.
We've got catalog, like pricing catalog pieces into it. We've got a full editor pieces into it. So all of these aspects of that make it so it's a multi-use tool for an SMB, right? I would say another like big guardrail for us is inbound, right? So we want to be creating content that inspires people to do their jobs differently and do their jobs better. I think some of the big guardrails we've talked about as a company, like we want to help small businesses take on and like do better, take on the David versus Goliath, or we want to help people break down any kind of like bureaucratic workflows inside of a company, right? And so all of these things become guardrails to help us connect product to what the market, right? What the market is trying to reach. So like we're in this big migration into, the digitization of documents.
Yeah.
Like we're in these mass, like COVID was obviously a massive migration of people like needing to be able to work, not just outside the office, but they need to be able to work in a way that they don't have to constantly go and look for approvals and things like that. So am I getting to your point there around those guardrails, or would you actually add any other guardrails that you've seen?
I think one of the guardrails I've seen is we're becoming all caps, the document creation and e-sign tool for small businesses. And, we've got the podcast, we've got LinkedIn audience growth, we've got organic SEO crushing it, we've got demand gen, that's doing a lot of paid ads that's just really getting things buzzing. We've got web traffic through the roof that's growing for us. We've had ups and downs in our pipeline and goals, and I think that's every company experiences that, especially with what's been going on in the world the last couple of years. But overall, just trending in a very impressive direction. And I see all of these things kind of coalescing, and like some of the specific guardrails that Dave talks about there are like, it's more about taking stuff off the table to give that direction, and not be distracted by a bunch of stuff. As a content team, we could have been like, well, we want to go work on Clubhouse. We want to go work on TikTok. We want to go work on this. Does that align with the core principles of the company? And that is like such an interesting thing for me. And it allows me to just stay focused. And we may, pivot a little bit within our function as like a content team or a demand gen team or a brand team or whatever it is within the marketing department. But I think in the last 6 months, we've really started to hone in with these guardrails, and it's been really helpful for my job.
Is our culture one of the guardrails as well that we have to do? So for anybody who wants to work at a great company with great culture, like one of our cultural things is learn, impact, fun, and empathy, right? So like it's part of our culture code. We lean into our culture, especially during turbulent times. COVID, we leaned into it. Ukraine, we lean into it. Belarus, we lean into it, right?
Yeah.
We lean into these things. And I see this podcast as leaning into, the learn and the fun aspect of it.
Yeah.
I see what the company turned around to do FreeSign as leaning into the impact piece of it. I see why we're in St. Pete is leaning into the impact piece of it as well.
Yeah. I want to transition into. Did you want to finish the rest? Let's finish the rest of this clip. Yeah. Let's finish the rest of this clip.
Because they were given a long runway from VCs who were like, hey, you guys are proven, you've done this before. We want to let you build this company the right way. And so as a marketer, I wasn't pressured to do short-term things because it was always like from the beginning, we're building $1 billion company. We're building $1 billion company. I think the hardest part for marketers is when you're in that in-between stage, right? When you don't know. And so if you join a well-backed startup, right? If you join like a Gong right now, who just raised $200 million, right? They can make short-term and long-term decisions because they know the cash position, and the whole company is aligned around those things. It's much harder to be in a position where this is a bootstrap business. We need to be profitable. We need to be, in the black by next month. Well, then no kidding. My go-to channel would not be SEO, right? It would not be content marketing. And so or it'd be content just in a different form. And so I think like that's such a...
Thanks, John.
So that inspires me to add one of our guardrails as an entire organization is predictable, repeatable, scalable.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and we've added discovery at the beginning of that. And it's actually part of our company strategy now. And so, a piece of that is this short, long-term thing. So like short and long-term, I won't get into the kind of the funding aspect of it. PandaDoc's a very stable, we've less startup. It's like stable scale up, kind of like, so we think both short term and long term.
Yeah, we definitely do.
But when it comes to marketing, I tend to think when I think of revenue and marketing, I think platforms of revenue. And I think, so you kind of think about this table where these lines, we're building a bigger table. And so, SEO is one board. Can we make it longer? Can we make it wider? Mm-hmm. Let's keep on growing that one. That's a long-term thing. Let's keep on thinking about it. Then short-term discovery. Can we figure out something? Does it work? Okay, now can we make it work predictably? If we put in this much money, can we get that much out? Okay, how much can we repeat that?
Yeah.
So predictable, repeatable, and then will it scale? And so I think this kind of goes back to one of your first questions, like where have we made mistakes in the past? Well, we've tried to scale stuff before we've gone from predictable to repeatable, right? And we're like, oh, it's there, go. And that's short-term thinking.
Yeah.
It puts us into short-termism. And now we're defending that short-term as well, as opposed to go through, did we discover it? Is it predictable? Is it repeatable? Is it scalable? And keep on going through those gates. That's one of the guardrails we have as an organization that I think is probably fairly consistent for companies of our size, but we're pretty transparent about it as well.
We are. Even with this podcast, it was like, let's start it bare bones, right? We started in the little extra room in the apartment next to your house. And we had a broken table.
That you never had me come over for until you moved, and then you invite me over. You move down the street, I can't wander over in my slippers.
We wanted you to be the first guest in a badass real studio.
This is amazing.
The last part I wanted to chat about with you for the last, 5 minutes or so here is just like storytelling, right? This is something that since you've stepped into the CMO role, it's something we've been wanting to do for a very long time at PandaDoc, but I think it's something that we're really putting at the forefront of our strategy based on like some of the all hands we've had in the last couple of months. How do you think storytelling has changed at our organization over the last year?
So product marketing and product and kind of our go-to-market, the reflection at the end of the year was, wow, we did a lot of launches. It felt very like drum beat, staccato. And I think the team was like, hey, that's fantastic. We got a lot of launches out the door. But was there any consistent threads through it? And so storytelling is something that we build on over time, and we start to, we can draw threads across multiple product launches, multiple customer stories. And I think we did a really good job of that in 2020 when we were talking about kind of like our Docs to Deals launch, when we were talking about helping sales professionals look more professional and close business faster. And we really amplified that story, and we reflected back what customers were coming to us and succeeding in doing.
Yeah.
And we even had this story across, like we called it it was like a brand promise. Hey, if you come to PandaDoc, we're going to help you look more professional and close business faster as a salesperson. And then that brand promise, we actually had brand kept promise indicators. And those became our success KPIs that we still use.
Yeah.
Right. We use those. I think Andre and Nate and we're pushing those into email, just even like a couple of months ago. And we've been using those consistently in the CS organization for our QBRs with customers. Hey, we made this promise to you when you came in. Let's keep on checking in. Are we keeping that promise? So that's a story with a thread that goes all the way through the customer experience.
Yeah. I think that actually, going back to one of the things I asked you, what is one of the best successes we've had as a company? Shout out to Nate Torvik and the team for doing what other companies, Grammarly inspired me. I've seen them do it for a couple of years, but
Salesforce used to do it for me a while back when they send an email with like, here's all the things you did.
Yeah.
Right?
So now PandaDoc, for those that are like, what are you talking about? PandaDoc now sends our customers an email that shows you how many documents you've sent and a bunch of other metrics that I am not remembering off the top of my head.
It's usually within our story about our WISE framework, workflow, insight, speed and experience.
Yeah.
Right. That's a story. And we constantly tell that story through these things. And so as we're going into this year, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about, like, I think we as a company, when we started really moving out of this, not moving out of, but we started augmenting into like this giant e-signature market.
Yeah.
Right. We're like, oh, upload and sign, but we do all that here. We'll give it away.
Yeah.
And we'll do all this extra stuff. But then it got very confusing for marketing and sales and how we went to market. And so there's this story of like, well, actually it's beyond upload and sign. And the story is upload and sign is table stakes for any company. You need to do a document. You need to do an agreement. You need to do anything that requires a signature or something that you want to share. Like, okay, upload and sign. But then what can it do? Well, you can add a product catalog to it. Now you can sell something.
Yeah.
Right? You can add customizable content to it. You can make it a template, and then everybody in your company can use it. You can make it an editable template, so you don't have to upload and sign it multiple times. Just like create the template, never have to upload it again. Right? It becomes part of your business workflow, and everybody can like reuse it.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about what I've seen with our storytelling is just what you mentioned. Like, I'm not going to say that our storytelling broke, but it changed. And I remember hearing Sergey, one of our founders of PandaDoc, at an all hands discussing something a little bit different. But he set the tone where he was like, we were doing like a push test, a stress test at this company to see like what's going to break when we go from 300 employees to 700. And he like looked at everybody. He's like, shit broke. And it's okay, guys. Okay. Like we're going to be okay. Now we know where we need to fix things. And I think that same philosophy is something that you have helped push with our storytelling. Is like, we didn't get it right, or it changed. COVID impacted. We're not just selling for sales team anymore. We're selling a bunch of other stuff. So our storytelling has changed.
We tried to change the tour story. We tried to go up market. We tried to do all this stuff. We changed too much, right? So there's like these changes. Like, okay, telling the story. Like ultimately. So I have a 5-year-old, almost 6.
Yeah.
Right. And so I read a lot of stories, right? But kids' stories are amazing because oftentimes they're very, very similar, right? Different authors, same story, same, very different themes, different takes on the themes. Or same characters, the story continues for a long time. And so I kind of think about like the product as having characters, right? So there's this idea of like, and our customers, like their teams have characters and characteristics in them. And so these characters interact. And those characters we're going to continue for many, many books. It's not going to be something that we go like, oh, that was this quarter's like book. No, it's going to be the story that we constantly build on and talk about. And so we have this, for us, it's like, how do sales professionals? It's the story of how we're going to help them throughout the evolution of their sales for them as sales professionals, as also for these companies, so that they make sure that like we're staying up and we're helping them at every stage of their company development. That's a long-term story, right? For somebody's document architecture and their e-signature architecture and their document workflow architecture, that is a story. You don't change the story; it evolves. You get new chapters in the story. You get new characters that come in. HR is a new character, or maybe the legal person's a new character, right? So these stories, like I think that we've been a little I think I have seen it. I have really experienced it for myself personally. That I think of us as like, oh, new year, new themes, but maybe it's not.
It's not.
Maybe it's really, how do we use these stories and tell the story a new way? Kind of like how we started on this whole podcast, like mission, vision, North Star, is we keep on sometimes telling these stories, we're going to get better at telling them, and people are going to feel them different ways.
Well said. Well, that is, I think, a great place to wrap up the conversation. As long as I get to be Captain Underpants in this story, I'm totally cool with it.
That's great. I'm glad you don't live next door to me anymore.
Thanks for joining us on the Customer Engagement Lab, Nate. Hope to have you back soon, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Engagement Lab, brought to you by PandaDoc. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you and what you think of the show.